Okay, Scott, you were saying?
I can wait, Denny. I can wait.
Okay,
No issue.
that's why I started the meeting. Okay, looks like we're all here. We'll get started with this morning's agenda. The first item on the agenda is unfinished business, and that is application B 2020-47, and that's 50 Brookside Crescent. We have a couple people in opposition, and then we have the applicants here as well. I just want to make sure that everyone did receive the elevations and the revised site plans. The members of the committee, did everyone got that and had an opportunity to review those?
Yes.
Just confirming that because they came in after the fact, so everyone had an opportunity to do that. Maybe what we'll do then is we'll hear from the opposition, and if anyone in opposition, if points have already been made once, we don't need to hear them again. If you want to reaffirm them, you can just say that you reaffirm the statements that have already been said, and that's sufficient enough because it will be duly noted as this is being recorded live in any event. So, is there a Lou Ann online?
I am here.
Good morning, Luann.
Good morning.
Turn the floor over to you.
Okay, Christine once again is going to be speaking for the opposition. Christine
Okay.
Ladderroot Secret, yep.
That's fine.
Before we go there, do we get a chance to speak after the applicant has spoken?
We'll see where it takes us. Not generally, but if there's something that comes up that's a new topic, then by all means, we'll give you the opportunity.
Thank you.
Okay.
Can you guys hear me? This is Christine.
Yes. Yeah, Christine, sure.
Perfect. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
My first question was actually Luann's question that you just asked about having a chance to speak again, since we didn't get that last time.
Okay.
So I'll try to go through stuff that won't be redundant. I'm not sure if you all saw the letters to the editor that were sent in recently to the record.
Mm-hmm.
The one I wanted to bring attention to was the one from Gerald Fisher, who had Fisher-Hallman Road named after him. He corroborated our position that the garage or smokehouse is older than the HIA claims. He said his great-grandfather lived there until his death in 1910. We also believe that the newer photos that were put forward by Owen Scott were from the farm Mr. Fisher mentions, which is across from Forest Heights Collegiate. And it was mentioned the last meeting that none of the Federals recognized any of the buildings in the newer photos, but unfortunately with Archives U of W closed to the public due to COVID, we've been unable to verify that. We do understand that that building isn't considered for a heritage designation, but believe the evidence we've shown, including the photos from before the land survey was made, do believe it's a unique property that should be preserved. With regards to the new drawings that were brought up, my involvement in this project is to advocate on behalf of my parents, who do reside at number 58 and are most affected by this project.
Right.
They are elderly, they have no internet. Last week's design meeting, which was organized with very little notice, considering the applicant has had all the neighbors' names and email addresses and house numbers since November. He agreed to hand deliver a copy to my parents, but he did not. So I gave them a copy last night. They've had very little time to look it over. Some of the points that have been made by concerned neighbors, many of whom are watching but are not registered to speak. So Heritage Kitchener wants the new building to fit with the character of the neighborhood, which is as per Michelle Drake. What are the plans there? How is it going to fit in? Because there's no other semis on Brookside. Except, I mean, that duplex that was built on the other side of 50, which the applicant has admitted was larger than he intended. We'd like to see a plan with number 58 and the new build in relation to it. Similar plan to what shows on the email, but once it's printed, you can't really see the figures that well. We wanted to point out the number 58 is not a two-story, it's a side split. So the two stories aren't actually until further down the street, whereas these semis are now going to be two-story. The design says they are not flush with each other. And if you can move one back, why can't you move the other one back? We're still questioning why the lot is being severed in such a manner to keep land from number 50 behind the new buildings. If the storage shed that will be behind the new buildings is also going to be used for tenancy, it brings us back to the parking issues that are on the street. The applicant already told us at the last meeting that the city allowed a duplex to be built, but only a single driveway to be added, and this makes no sense from a planning perspective. The duplex was supposed to be a raised bungalow or a granny flat, as was pointed out in the email sent to the committee from the resident at number 42. So where are we going to end up with the semis regarding this, and who monitors that? Since my parents were only able to see the design plans last night when I gave it to them, they want to see some more measurements and want more clarification. They are not architects with an ability to read blueprints. They'd also like to see the land survey as well. There's also a concern with the fence on number 58 side, because it is slightly inside the border of the property, and they do not want the fence taken down with the new build. We're questioning why the lot size has decreased by 6 feet in length from the original plans. How many feet back from the sidewalk will each new semi be? If the lot size is smaller, the new builds need to be appropriate for a smaller lot size. There was a question brought up about floor space ratio. If it's above 4, are we trying to build larger dwelling on a smaller parcel of land and we will end up with a towering building again? So we're questioning what the floor to space ratio is. The owner of number 42 has no sunshine on her back patio because of the duplex. 58 won't get a breeze from the east anymore, and the owners of 39 feel like someone from the duplex is staring into their home all the time due to its height. There's also a door pictured on the drawing from new build number 54 that will be right at number 58's dining window. There was also an issue over the window regarding snow removal. The applicant hired a company to remove snow, and all he did was push it across the street to the boulevard, and then the city plows push it into the driveways. So snow removal will be an issue going forward with less land to put the snow. How wide will the driveways be for each semi, and how many parking spots will there be? Parking issues will be compounded with more tenants, as most families have multiple vehicles. And as I am sure bylaw can attest to, parking is already an issue on Brookside. In conclusion, we are trying to make sure that the same mistakes that were made, we believe, by both the city and the applicant when approving the severance on the other side of 50 Brookside and allowing the giant duplex to be built are not allowed to happen on this side. Plans should include neighbors' houses for more transparency as to how much in or out the new builds will be to theirs, and more than 72 hours given for their input. Even though above all, we are still advocating for the preservation of the garage smokehouse, even if it is not given a heritage designation. To quote the letter from Mr. Fisher, the old farmhouse still stands and based on its historical past is definitely a heritage home, including its garage. The homestead has already been altered, and in my opinion, the historical features should be protected. Thanks, everyone.
Okay, thanks. Maybe what we'll do is we'll let the applicant address the comments or the issues raised, and then we can hear from staff, and then we'll turn it over to the committee. Okay, so the applicant, who's going to speak? Is it Owen or Michael?
Can everyone hear me?
Yep.
Yeah, we can now. Sure.
Thanks. So I understand that the neighbors have a lot of concerns about how this property is going to be built, what it's going to look like, the parking and so forth. But I think at the end of the day, we need to rely on the capability of the city to govern all of this. And this is their purpose. I have a lot of faith in them. Secondly, there's been a lot of, I'm going to say, accusations of me having misled the neighbors on the first property. It's mentioned in both letters or both email comments, comment 1 and comment 2, I believe, or sorry, comment 1 and comment 3. They're talking about misleading. They're talking about me calling it a granny flat. I'm not even sure what that term means, but I have the letter here that I sent to the neighbors, and I'd like to read it just to remind everybody about what I did tell everybody before I proposed to build next door. It says, "Dear neighbor, we have submitted an application to sever a lot and build a house where our pool is currently located. The pool has not been properly functioning since 2015 and is over 40 years old and would require major repairs, and we naturally never spend any time there as a result. The primary purpose for the property is to potentially provide accommodation for our aging parents, which will allow us to keep them close. Our preliminary plans are to design the structure similar to Ben's house, and that is the house that is, I believe it's, I don't know the exact address, but it's the corner house, as a raised bungalow, so the property will easily fit into the landscape of the neighborhood." So we did announce that it would be a raised bungalow. We never called it a granny flat. We even referenced a house in the neighborhood that looks exactly like it. So I'm going to respectfully reject these accusations that I misled the neighborhood. Maybe nobody really paid attention back then, but it went through the same process. Everybody had the opportunity to object to it or to put in their concerns. So I don't know much else what to say. I've bent over backwards to work with Garrett and Sandro and Michelle in accommodating all the neighbors' concerns in the design of the property. We've proposed to move the front line back from 6 meters, what was proposed, to now 7.8 meters for the one, and I think it's 6.6 meters for the other. We've staggered them to address the line of sight concern that Ken had. We've even proposed to reduce them in size. So we've done what we could to accommodate, the actual concerns. I think at the end of the day, there's a real desire not to see change happen, and I can understand that. I think that's the nature that we all have. But I feel that as long as I am complying and working with the city strenuously to try to please everybody here, this should be moved forward. Regarding the shed or the coach house in the back, again, I see this as a completely unrelated issue. There's going to be fenced in between there. That coach house will be still part of my property here at 50 Brookside. Has no relevance on this whatsoever. Thanks.
Great, thanks, Michael. We hear from staff, just maybe if you have any comments regarding the concerns from the neighborhood or the application, and then we'll open the floor to the members of the committee.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I will defer to Garrett Stevenson. He has
Sure.
been working very closely with Mr. Kraus on the application. Okay, I see
Okay.
Garrett's here. He's joined us.
Hi, Garrett.
Hi, good morning. Thank you, Julianne. Through the chair, we did hold a Zoom meeting. The residents are right. There was short notice on that. We did schedule it as soon as we did receive updated concepts. Unfortunately, just because we only had 1 month between the two meetings, we did want to get the information out to the residents as soon as possible. The general chronology of what has occurred is an elevation drawing was received and we sent that to the neighborhood. We then had a meeting over Zoom and we discussed some possible solutions. And then a revised drawing was sent over the weekend to everyone that implemented some of those changes. I'm not saying that the drawings necessarily, I think you've heard this morning that they don't absolve all of the neighborhoods comments or concerns, but what that drawing did look at is there was a couple of changes. So one, the overall footprints of the buildings are smaller, which means that there was a smaller lot size, which meant they're not as deep, which meant a greater separation from the existing shed at the rear yard. The buildings were pushed back further from the street in line with 58 Brookside. So 58 Brookside is approximately 7.5 meters. The semi-detached closest to Brookside the setback was increased to 7.8 meters. The right semi-detached is 6.6 meters setback. The fronts of the buildings were staggered so that there wasn't as large of an appearance based on the different setbacks of different buildings. And then at the request of our urban design staff, the porch and the garage were mirrored on the left semi-detached. So rather than having the side of a garage wall facing 58 Brookside, they were reversed and now the porch is adjacent to that property instead of the garage. So those are the changes that occurred between the Zoom meeting that was held last week and the drawings that were sent around on the weekend.
Okay, good. Thanks, Garrett. Okay, members? Questions or comments or Scott?
Couple of questions, Garrett, for staff. During the Zoom meeting with the residents, did any discussion take place about removing the shed at the back and extending the lots a little deeper and actually increasing the setback from the street?
Through the chair, we did discuss that. The applicant, the owner of 50 Brookside, is looking to retain that detached building for the purpose of potentially doing a legalized accessory dwelling unit or a tiny home in the backyard. So those regulations were considered by Planning and Strategic Initiatives last night and will proceeding to council. So at this time, the applicant can't formally receive approval to legalize that existing situation. So it is my understanding is their intent to maintain that ability to do so. And that's why they're not looking to remove that building at this time.
Okay, just to follow up, Garrett, then it's kind of a two-part question. Are staff satisfied with the revised plans, setbacks, et cetera? And if so, do we need to do anything as a committee? Originally, I think it was condition 4, and then it was IIID, talked about the approval of plans by the Director of Planning. Do we need to say something that it should be consistent with the plans that are attached today, or what's your recommendation?
Through the chair, I would recommend that the Director of Planning has the authority to actually review those plans with direction from the Committee of Adjustment. So if those plans were something that the Committee of Adjustment was supportive or wanted to see additional changes, if the resolution could include that decision, I'm confident that we'd be able to then implement that at the Director of Planning level.
All right. Anyone else? Bob?
Yes, good morning, fellow committee members. This is quite an interesting and complicated application. Part of it, I think, is neighborhood reluctance on the first property developed, the one to the west end. And so actually I have a question for fellow committee members. Has anybody done a drive-by on this property to see the previous build on the right-hand side?
I've been by a couple months ago, yes.
Okay. It didn't show up in any of the reports and not available on the out-of-date Google Street View. So I took a drive-by over the weekend, and I'll choose my words carefully here. The previous build is like nothing anywhere in that neighborhood. And I think that particular development is what has spawned a lot of concern from the neighborhood, because they're afraid that on the left-hand side, they'll get the same, choose my words carefully here, the same look as the first development. Over the drawings that came through over the weekend, I can see that, at least from the elevations, what I see is a great improvement over what was the previous development. I am in support of the fact that they have staggered the two buildings that will break up the front of the streetscape, making it a little more compatible with the rest of the neighborhood. It's unfortunate. Okay, that's my first point. Second point being, it's unfortunate that there is not more documentation on the smokehouse garage. A lot of it seems to be anecdotal. One of the things that I would have liked to have seen was some information brought forward as to what's inside the garage, which could very clearly determine, or at least shed some light on, the age of the building. For example, the roof structure, if it is built with what I would call modern construction, 2x4s, 2x6s, 2x8s, which are not really 2x4s, that would indicate that it was built after 1950. If it is the old rough cut, true 2x4s, where a 2x4 is 2 inches by 4 inches, or 2x6, 2x8, 2x10. If they're the rough cut, that would indicate that it was sometimes built back in the 30s or 40s. Not much was built in the 40s due to the war. It would have been nice to have that, but we don't. So we have to move on. So, and there are still some neighbors who are concerned and opposed to this. I understand and can see their point of view. This is a great change to a really nice neighborhood. And I guess my question might be for the neighbors, through all of the discussions and Zoom meetings that has been held with the owner and staff, are they a little less annoyed or concerned than they were when we first dealt with this project several months ago, many months ago? So that's my question, is for the neighbors. Is this better than you thought it was going to be? Okay, no comment.
Here we go. No, it takes me to get on.
I'll make a comment. It was bringing the speaker in, I think, so I didn't hear the end of what you said, Bob. You said, what is the neighbors' comments, or how do we feel?
Yeah, essentially, this has been going on for months and months and months. And I'm going on the basis that what we see now is substantially different than what we saw several months ago, many months ago. Have some of, or a number of the concerns the neighbors had, have they been addressed through this process? And do you feel a little better about it now than you did back in December?
I don't feel better, no. I feel more annoyed. I feel like we're being passed by. I agree with what you're saying as far as the duplex does not look at all like the house on the bend. It totally, to me, does not fit in. And I've always liked the looks of the house on the bend. I do have a question. Can I ask another question at this point as well? So Garrett, when he was, I don't know if he's still Garrett, he said just this morning that the semis are to be at the same distance as 58. Is that what he said?
The one is
going to go all the way back to 58?
I believe that's what he said, Garrett. That's what you said, correct?
Yes, through the chair. Using our GIS mapping, I was able to measure the setback of 58 Brookside Crescent, and it's about 7.5 meters. The proposed semi-detached on the left-hand side closest to that is 54 Brookside Crescent. The revised plans that were sent around on the weekend show that as a setback of 7.8. So it is further back than the closest part of 58 Brookside Crescent.
Okay.
Do you have anything else, Luann?
No, I think that's all.
Okay. Any other questions? Comments?
Will I get another chance to respond? Mike Krause?
Sure, Mike.
One of the committee members asked about the materials that were used in the garage, and I just wanted to comment on that. It has a newer cedar roof on it. It has newer rafters on it. It's got newer parging on the inside walls. It's got electrical wiring, which wasn't even existent in 1855. It's got a newer garage door and opener. And the stonework, according to Owen Scott, who's a 50-year heritage expert, it appears clearly inconsistent with the original 1855 stonework of the farmhouse, which is the same as the coach house in the back. It was also made to look like the original house. So that's one thing I wanted to say. And the other one was that I also received a very authentic and emotional letter from Ken's daughter, Christine, over the weekend. And it became very clear in that email that the issue about the stone garage is not that everybody loves the sight of it or wants to protect it, but there's a personal relationship between Ken's family and the person that rebuilt it in the 60s. He was Christine's godfather. And I see there's a lot of emotional attachment there. And though I respect that, I don't feel that that this is something that should prevent this whole project from moving forward. I have a lot of respect and a lot of admiration for that. But I feel like all of the reasons and all the items that are being mentioned here really have nothing to do with the real reason. This was apparently Mr. Federer's, who was the previous owner's legacy. He was a close family friend. He recently passed away. And I think there's a lot of emotions that are preventing the neighbors from wanting to see this garage go. But a lot of the facts or a lot of the, evidence or a lot of the reasons therefore are really inapplicable.
Okay, Jennifer?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I am a bit hesitant to weigh in on this application because I don't think I have the history that my fellow members have on this file. I think this is my first time actually being on the panel considering this application. I heard the applicant's comment that the coach house has no relevance whatsoever to the application. And I don't know what the other committee members' thoughts are, but I do respectfully disagree with that statement. What happens as a result of cutting out these two smaller lots is you end up with an irregular shaped lot. And that's part of the criteria we have to consider under section 51 sub 24 is the shape and dimensions of the lots. And we're hearing today that the purpose of retaining that portion of the property is to essentially wedge in further living space in the midst of everyone's rear yard amenity area. So I have some concerns with that. I know it has the support of staff. I haven't really heard, Mr. Hanna, I think you made some comments about pushing the houses further back, but that's my observation on this. And to me, this is a bit of a case of the applicant wanting their cake and eating it too. So those are just my comments, but I will, I'll go with whatever the committee is considering on this application.
Scott?
Can I add to what my fellow member Jennifer has commented? I truly do not like this application, but I want to put the facts down here so that everybody has them in front of you. We are hearing from staff, and we heard it before, that the garage has no heritage value. So that's the first point. I think we're also hearing from staff, although I'm going to get Garrett to confirm, that semis are a permitted use on this property. Realistically, the only application before us, though, is a consent to sever one parcel. So somebody could theoretically come back and build a single detached house, but that's not what's in front of us. I have a question for Garrett as well. As the original application was looking to create the lot 16.2 meters by 33.5, I think if we go forward to support this, that would have to change to the depth of 31.69. But I do share Jennifer's concerns that the applicant's having his cake and eat it too. I think these lots should extend completely to the back, allowing for even further setback of these homes, even though staff has really done their best to try and match and mimic the setback to the house next door. So I'm on the fence, but I'm leaning to the negative.
Anyone else?
Yes, Mr. Chair, I hadn't really thought much, and thanks to my fellow committee members about this, whether it's called storage or whether it's called, sorry, I'm looking at the submission that came in over the weekend, existing guest cottage. Again, this is complicating matters somewhat. Does it need to be there? Does a property owner have a right to have a property that is something other than rectangular or square? So I do agree that if that was not there, then the whole footprint of this proposed project could be set back by, I'm just going to guess, probably 12 meters, 14 meters further back, which would allow a much greater setback from the road. I agree with staff and looking at the drawing here. The front yard setback for the proposed 54 is pretty much in line with 58. But then again, the other one, 52, is not. It would be nice if I would support this if the whole thing was moved back, which would mean getting rid of the existing guest cottage or whatever you want to call it at the back. It's a complicated issue. So like Scott, I'm kind of sitting on the fence on this one. It's been a complicated thing, and it really has been upsetting to the existing neighborhood. And I'll leave it at that. So I'm wanting to hear more convincing arguments, either from staff or my committee members, as to the correct way to proceed with this, because something's going to happen here. It's a piece of property, and under today's desire for higher intensity and higher density and intensification, we need to find places to put people other than paving farmland. So again, that's my comments for the moment. I'm hoping to hear some more convincing arguments one way or the other.
Mike?
Just a quick comment. I hesitate to comment a lot on this project because I'm trying to keep, I don't know, emotion and opinion out of the conversation. I understand where the neighbors are in this situation, and I certainly understand what the owner's plan is or emotion is. I just have some personal feelings about trying to, again, I think my words carefully, about creating a situation that really, except in the minds of the neighborhood, really doesn't exist. I was a relatively close neighbor of that property for 20 years. And the property never came up in anybody's discussion as to, the property being a heritage property, being on a heritage tour. It's a lovely property that needs to be retained, but I'm not so sure that we have to dictate let's call it the surrounding property, for lack of a better word. I like the property. I just like the fact that we're going to be able to extend the use of the land around it. And I think if from a design standpoint, if architecturally it's created to blend in with the neighborhood, it will be far more effective as a residence. And I'm not sure if the blending in becomes architecturally make the properties look like the farmhouse or make the properties look like mid-century architecture, which is kind of where the neighborhood is. It doesn't have to look like ultra modern new build. And again, that's where I am on situation. I'm like Bob, I guess. I don't know which way to lean on this.
I guess where my head's coming from on this application, we're here to consider a severance of a property. And when we're considering a severance of a property, we have to look at how the lot fabric fit together. Jennifer's point's well taken, and generally you wouldn't sever out and leave the back end of a lot with the neighboring property. That's just not very good planning. So I think that's, we need to give some consideration to that. Garrett, if we were to grant the severance, just to refresh our memory, what would the normal under the existing zoning, what would the front lot distance be? Setback?
Yes, in the R4 zoning standards, the minimum setback is 4.5 meters for a residential portion or a porch. And the minimum setback for a garage that houses a required parking space would be 6 meters.
Right.
Just to clarify, two questions that Mr. Hanna posed to me. The R4 residential 4 zone does permit semi-detached dwellings, and the proposed lot width and lot area, as shown on the revised plan, if the committee would choose to support a lot that's deeper to have greater separation from that existing detached structure, that was the proposal, to have the smaller lot so that there was greater separation between those. The recommendation should be revised to 31.69 meters in depth, as Mr. Hanna had suggested.
So then, from what I'm hearing, if we granted the severance, they would actually be able to build closer to the lot line on the front setback, and so the applicant's making that concession. So, like I said, I think we need to look at this as to what the application is specifically, and that is a severance. And I'm just throwing that out there. Does anyone else have any other comments? Bob?
Yes, Mr. Chair, something that has been mentioned not only by you, but by other committee members as well. This is just a severance. So and correct me if I'm jumping in the wrong direction here. Technically, once this severance is done, then could the applicant completely revise what they plan to do on that piece of land? Now we're looking at a duplex with a staggered front and proper setbacks and all that. But if once they get the severance, can they not just change that to put in whatever they want?
That would depend on how we condition the approval. Bob?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. You're starting to see where I'm going with this.
Yeah. And that would be covered, I think, and Scott pointed this out in item, what number is that? 4, 3D. Scott?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, thank you very much for pointing that out. That was the reason why I raised it.
Yeah.
One of the things that, given the fact that I have a bit of history and heritage planning, one of the things that I wanted to mention to the committee, and I should have at the outset, is the reason I asked for the deferral is right now the entire heritage designation covers the entire property. And what you'll see that one of the conditions of approval is that heritage designation be redone so that this severed parcel is removed from the heritage designation. But I think based on what I'm hearing, I'm not going to support the shape and size of the lot currently. I'm still not convinced that the makeup of the proposed dwelling that's going on here couldn't be done better. I mean, I was hoping that staff would come back and show me whether it be a semi or a detached home that actually starts at 7.8 meters on the west side and actually maybe recesses back more towards the 10.96 meter setback on the existing house. That would make more sense from my perspective. And that means that area at the back needs to be included in the proposed severed lot. So I am not going to be supporting this application, and hopefully calmer heads will prevail and a larger lot will come back to us with a different setback.
Bob?
Yes, through you, Mr. Chair, to Scott. Are you now then suggesting that we defer this another time for staff and the developer and heritage department to kind of sort this out? Because I see where you're coming from. The whole thing would be better if it was pushed further back into the lot, which would have mean, of course, that existing guest cottage or storage area might have to go, but there's compromises always in life. So
I'm only
again,
willing to defer to my fellow member, Mike, if the applicant is willing to do so. If they want a decision, we'll make the decision.
Michael, Mr. Kraus, I think you kind of see where this is heading. Can I have a comment?
Yes. I'm obviously a little disappointed at some of the comments I'm hearing. I think it's important to know that in the last 6 years, that storage shed, as some people are still referring to, has been used as a residential unit. So for the last 6 years, people have been living in there. Currently, there's someone living in that unit. The cars, for the better part of the year, are parked in my driveway here. I have a huge circular driveway. And I know it should be legalized as of tomorrow. So when I said that there was no relevance, I stand by that. There should be no relevance. It's kept on my property. So I think it's important that staff has more information on all of the circumstances. So I would have to reluctantly, I guess, agree to defer this in the fear that a premature decision will be made not having all the facts. So that's my answer, my response to that.
Okay, so you're willing to do a deferral, Jennifer?
Mr. Chair, I think the purpose of the deferral was to consider changing the lot shape, and it doesn't sound from the comments of the applicant that he's going to be using the deferral for that basis, for that purpose. So I'm just, again, making a comment here, but I'm not making a motion.
Bob?
yes, Mr. Chair, there seems to be some confusion, and maybe it's just me. The applicant is saying that the building out the back of the proposed severed lots is for living accommodation. And in the submission that came through over the weekend, the aerial photograph with overlaid lot lines and stuff calls that a guest cottage, whereas the drawings submitted by AFJ Building Design refers to that. There's no date on it. Refers to that as storage. So I'm confused. So maybe to move this ahead, the applicant, the committee is kind of sitting on the fence on this a little bit, and I think we need to move forward.
Yep.
The applicant has indicated that a deferral for more information would be acceptable to him. Unless I got that wrong. So to move ahead, Mr. Chair, again, this file is going to be 4 inches thick by the time we're done. I'm going to move that this be deferred so that we can get further clarification on the heritage aspect for the whole property, as Mr. Hanna has brought forward, and also some further consideration for making the front setbacks more in alignment with other adjacent properties. So that's my motion, Mr. Chair. 2 phases. One is for the heritage aspect of the whole property, because that needs to be cleared up. And the second to further explore whether or not these properties should go all the way back to the rear lot line. That's my comment, or that's my motion.
Motion. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Mike, all in favor?
Through the chair, sorry. I will need a deferral date, and it is possible that this application will need to be re-advertised. If the lot sizes are going to be changing, the notice is inadequate. So a deferral fee will apply for sure in this instance.
All right. Okay, so there'll be a deferral fee until when, Bob? Next meeting? We don't need to sit on this much longer.
We've been sitting on this, Mr. Chair. We've been sitting on this since before COVID. I'm exaggerating. Is a month enough? Maybe a question for staff, Garrett or Julianne.
No, let's ask Garrett has carriage of it, really. Let's ask Garrett.
Okay,
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would want to understand the scope of the clarification that's required, that you indicated clarification on heritage of the whole property. Need to understand what clarification or additional information that the committee would require, so we can anticipate what would be required of the applicant, of staff, in order to bring that back. So this item did, there is a heritage impact assessment that was considered by Heritage Kitchener already. So I need to know what additional information is required by the committee.
Mr. Chair, seeing I made the motion, I was referencing Mr. Hanna's past expertise with regards to heritage functions, and correct me if I'm wrong, Scott, but the whole property in question is designated heritage. And so wouldn't we need to modify that before we could undesignate it as heritage?
Not correct. That is not correct.
So I could offer a clarification from staff perspective. The condition was included, should the committee choose to support the severance, there is a condition that gives us the authority to go ahead and amend the designating bylaw. So the designating bylaw on the new limits of the property and the revised legal description for 50 Brookside Crescent would form part of the designating bylaw, and these severed lands would then be removed from that designation. That would be the staff's intention should the committee support a severance.
So I guess maybe because you're considering removing that shed, is you just want a clarification on that shed and its heritage aspects. Is that not correct, Bob?
I think it has been fairly or reasonably well confirmed that the garage, smokehouse, shed is of no historical value, and that it was built to suit the style of 50 Brookside, but it has not been, at least in my opinion, has not been substantiated to be a heritage item. I guess further to what Garrett has said, that this piece of property, the heritage aspect, can be removed by staff.
Yeah.
Okay, so that solves that one question that Scott brought up, was that the whole property is zoned or is designated heritage, but staff can remove that heritage aspect. So that changes my motion a little bit, because that could be done at the staff. That could be done at the staff level.
So you don't need any reference to heritage in your motion, right?
Okay, yes. Delete my in my motion, delete the portion referencing heritage, because Garrett has resolved that, or will be through the staff level or at the staff level.
Mike?
Can I just get some quick clarification on the buildings that we're discussing? Am I correct in that the building that's on the retained lands portion is the building that is occupied in some level of tenancy and will remain, and is not in any way, shape, or form heritage designated, and that the stone garage is on the property or the portion that's going to be severed, and it is claiming some kind of heritage status?
Correct. But I don't think
I guess so.
The stone garage is not claiming heritage status. It's just that will be on the proposed severance piece, which would be removed then.
Yes, if I could offer a point of clarification, Chair. So there are 3 buildings in question here. We have the Heritage Residential 2-story building. There's the building that has been described as a residential or a storage, depending on which plans you're looking at, it's labeled a different way. And then there's the garage. The designating bylaw that's registered on title of 50 Brookside talks about the heritage aspects of the cultural values of interest of 50 Brookside being the value related to the architecture of the house,
Yes.
that it's a Georgian architectural style. And then the description of the heritage attributes describes different aspects of the building. It does not describe the storage shed / residential unit detached in the rear or the garage.
Right. Scott?
Yeah, if I can help Bob's deferral out, I think one of the critical pieces here is the status of the shed out the back that we're not particularly clear on as to why it cannot be removed to accommodate a larger lot. I think we need that information. I'd really like to understand from the city's perspective as well what the current status is. Is it approved for a habitable unit? How is it serviced? All that information I think is very, very critical to this.
Yeah.
Because one of the things I'm looking for is, can we not come back with a revised site plan for the severed parcel that has a little more sensitivity to the setbacks, both for the west and the east, to the actual heritage house. The heritage house is set back 10 meters. In my mind, you would be having a setback on a new dwelling that would be slowly but surely going from the west to the east in an increased setback. And I want to understand why that is not possible. So those are the two reasons I'm looking for a deferral, if the applicant's agreeable.
Well, and I think we heard that the applicant is agreeable, reluctantly, but is agreeable. So that's that. Bob has a motion on the floor. Bob, do you want to revise the terms of your motion to reflect the statements just made by Scott?
Well, my initial motion had two aspects to it. One being the heritage, which we, to my satisfaction, has been cleared up. The second thing being front yard setbacks and whether or not this can be accommodated to be more in keeping with the style of the adjacent properties, both 58 and 50. My amended deferral would be for 1 month to discuss. Oh, and there's also, Scott brought up the issue of the existing property, guest cottage. We need to know a little bit more about that. So my deferral would be essentially to see if there's any way to increase the front yard setbacks to be in keeping with the setbacks of the two adjacent properties.
Okay.
So it's from 2 down to 1.
1, right, with no heritage whatsoever. Okay.
I guess.
Okay, so that's now the motion on the floor. It is the motion then also specifies to the next month's meeting. Is there a second? Mike, all in favor? Carried. Thank you. It's deferred for accordingly. Okay.
Wow.
Before we get on to the next item on the unfinished business, I just want to bring forward Avondale, and I think there's a lot of people that are sitting in queue for this one that were substantially in opposition. This application will be deferred until, do we have a proposed deferral date for that? Julianne, was it next month?
Through you, Mr. Chair, yes, it was intended to be deferred until next month.
Okay, so just, I want it so that no one's hanging around unnecessarily. Can I just get a motion, maybe Bob, to defer this to next month?
Yes, Mr. Chair, I think that's a good idea. Don't want to keep people hanging around here any longer than necessary. So I move that this application be deferred until next month.
Okay, second. Scott, all in favor? Carried. Thanks. Okay, next item on the agenda then is B 2021-11. And also concurrently A 2021-033, and this is for Fairway Road and Woolner Trail. We have the agent and a delegation in support of this application. Just one comment, I think some housekeeping on the staff report. Two things. In recommendation II, it says that be deferred to the April 20th Committee of Adjustment meeting. I think that should probably be taken out, which was probably just a carryover from the last report. So that should be removed. And there's a GRCA fee for $430 that needs to be included in this as well. Does anyone have any questions or comments? It's a fairly thick file as well.
Well, Mr. Chair, seeing no one's jumping in, I'll jump in as I sometimes am known to do. You're right, fairly comprehensive, very thick file, comprehensive information. I agree with your comment that in recommendation II, or that one phrase be removed. I am going to jump in here and say that this, I think, is a good idea, something that needs to be done. So I will move that this be approved as amended by the chair, as amended with the, how many conditions we have? Well, there's the first one, minor variance. So with the conditions as outlined in the staff report. That's
plus the GRCA fee.
Yeah.
Plus the GRCA fee. Okay, Scott.
Yeah, I'm gonna second that, Mr. Chairman, but I want to make just one comment before we do. The purpose of this application is really to create a developable parcel. GRCA owns the property right now, and part of it is non-developable, part of it is. There was a letter of concern that was raised. That's the only reason I want to make the comment. And I just want staff to advise, I believe in the report, it said that this, the school would require at least a zoning bylaw amendment, if not an official plan amendment. So there will be other public processes involved here. If that could be confirmed by staff, that would help me.
Yes, through the chair, an official plan amendment and a zoning bylaw amendment application would be required. So as Mr. Hanna had noted, this would be creating a developable parcel, and the actual land use and all the considerations like access and transportation, all of those concerns that were addressed in that letter, look forward to resolving those and addressing them as part of those applications.
Okay, thanks, Mr. Chairman. I will second the motion by Bob.
Okay, all in favor?
Through the chair, I just wanted to confirm there were regional conditions, and I didn't know if they were captured in the report, but because this package was so large, I just want to make sure I'm including those in the committee's decision.
They should be included, yeah.
Thank you. Again, sorry, it's just the report was very large. So
Yeah. I think they were in there, but I know the fee was missed. Anyways, we want to make sure that that's captured.
Thank you so much.
Mr. Chair, a point of clarification. There's a GRCA fee, but the owner is the GRCA. So the GRCA is going to pay themselves the fee?
I guess. It was in their report.
Okay. It'll drive their bookkeepers crazy, I guess.
Well, I know. That's what you get when you pick generic comments, I guess.
Yeah.
Okay, so the second, all in favor? Carried. Thanks.
Whoa.
Okay, next application is A 2021-19, 30 Water Bowl Trail.
Mr. Chair, for the sake of expediency, I've looked at this.
Yeah.
The numbers that we're looking at are the
Yeah.
definition of minor. So
Yeah.
I move that this be approved with no conditions.
I'll second that.
Second, Mike, all in favor? Carried. Thank you. Applications A 2021-26, 11 Whitney Place. recommending approval without conditions. Questions, comments, motion? Scott?
If there's no one in opposition, Mr. Chairman, I think this is an excellent rebuild of a porch. It looks wonderful, and I fully support the staff recommendation.
All right, second. Jennifer, all in favor? Carried. Thank you. Next applications, A 2021-27, 573 Guelph Street. Recommending approval with out conditions. No one in opposition. No one registered in opposition. Motion, question, comments? Scott?
Mr. Chairman, is the applicant here? I just had one quick question for the applicant. This was the one where the application form wasn't attached, and I appreciate staff sending it to us the other day. I noticed that with the side yards being recommended less than a meter, that there wouldn't be allowance for windows on the sides of these semis, which seems a little odd to me. And I just wanted to know if the applicant already had building plans and were aware of that.
We're working on the plans, but we were not aware that the windows on the side will not be allowed.
Mr. Chairman, that's what I kind of figured. And I think in the long and short of it, even if we do approve this, one of the sides of the semi is going to be 1.2 to meet the requirements in order to get windows. Because I think just having a porch out the front and some windows out the back is not going to be a good design. But that's just my comments. I'm happy to support it, but I don't think it'll happen.
Julianne?
For you, Mr. Chair, I just wanted to mention that perhaps the ability or inability to have a window might be dictated by the building code.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to bring that to the committee's attention.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's why I raised it, Mr. Chairman, because I'm very familiar with the building code. So there you go.
Okay. Anyone else?
Mr. Chair, I'm happy to make a motion to approve the application.
Okay. Second. Bob, all in favor? Carried. Thank you.
Yeah.
Next applications, A 2021-28, 11 Spring. In support. Recommending approval. With conditions. I had a note here and just hang on a second. So for clarification, with the driveway and the widening of the driveway, do we need to amend this application?
Mr. Chairman, just for clarification, which application are we dealing with right now?
Springdale Drive.
Okay.
11 Springdale Drive. And where it says clarification under the bottom last sentence, it's just a little confusing as to what's going on here. I didn't know if this application needed to be. It says 1 parking space is required for the dwelling, 1 parking space required for the home business, and 1 parking space required for the employee. All 3 spaces must be independently accessible. This is not possible on this property without widening the driveway. The owner does not want to do that. The double wide driveway exists and is to remain, and therefore the variance is regarding the parking requirement for the home business.
Is Denny there?
Yeah, I'm here. Yeah, Julianne, sorry. I don't know why I had this note here. That's why I'm just trying to figure it out.
Through you, Mr. Chair,
Yeah.
what the planner who wrote the report is trying to say is that really there's no need for the three spaces. What the bylaw requires would have required a third space. That's the only change that is being made, because in order to provide a third space, you probably would have had to widen the driveway, which is not the intent of the applicant. So that's
Right.
why they're asking and seeking for that variance, so to go from 3 required spaces to 2, and that includes the space that is required for the employee.
Okay. It was just, I guess it was the way it was written when I
Yeah,
read it.
I understand. Yeah.
A little confusing. Scott?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, just, I had either a question for staff or the applicant, and it had to do with condition number 2 about how long we had to fulfill the occupancy permit. It's listed as June 1st of 2021, which is not a lot of time. Should that be increased slightly? That's my question for staff or the applicant.
Maybe it
Through you,
should be
Mr.
2020.
Yeah,
Yeah.
through you, Mr.
Sorry.
Chair, if you want to, hang on. If you want to extend it by a month or 2, that's fine with staff.
I raised that concern, Mr. Chair, because we've had others that are on the agenda later that go June 1st, 2022.
Yeah.
So maybe we just simply say June 1st, 2022, just to be on the safe side.
Sure.
Hello?
Yeah.
Can anybody hear me?
Yes.
Hello?
Yep.
Yes.
I'm the applicant, Elsa Kautsky,
Mm-hmm.
and I was just reading what had been said. So the employee, if you want to call it, is my daughter who lives up the street. She does not need to park here on my driveway. She just walks
Okay.
here. So there is really no need. There is no need for one because I'm the only one parking. She walks here. She lives up 2 houses and has taken over the office sometimes, but she works remotely most of the time. So reading on the general intent of the zoning bylaw, that apparently that seemed to have been sort of approved in a way that they said there really wasn't a need for a third parking spot because she does not need to park here.
Okay. All right. So Scott, yeah, that was changed. That
I'm prepared to move the application, Mr. Chairman, with a slight change to condition 2 to say June 1st, 2022, to give the applicant plenty of time to fulfill the zoning occupancy.
Okay.
That's my motion.
I'm sorry, what does that mean?
Means you have more time to fulfill your condition.
What condition would that be? I won't be able to enlarge that driveway.
No, we're not
If you look
referring
at
to that. It's for an occupancy permit.
Oh, for a home office?
Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah. Yeah. So
What
it's,
does what to do now?
it just means that you have more time to do it. That's all. They
But I
were
already
leave-
applied for all of those things. We
That's-
already
that's-
applied all of those.
That's fine. It's just housekeeping for us.
So what
It
is
means
the next
it's-
step
it-
for me?
We
You've
can have a
applied-
conversation offline.
Yeah.
through-
Okay, so there's a motion on the floor. Can I hear a second? Bob, on favor? Carried. You're approved. Subject to appeal.
So am I approved? Is that what you're saying?
Subject to an appeal period, but yes, in all intents and purposes, you're approved. You just have to wait 20 days. Okay, next application is A202129. That's 20 Monroe Street. Recommending approval without conditions. Anyone have any questions, comments? Scott?
Mr. Chairman, I thought you were mentioning this application because this is one where the driveway needs to be widened, and I was thinking there might actually need to be a curb cut. So the question for staff is, why weren't conditions imposed? I was thinking a condition might be that.
Yeah, no, I see that. Yeah, yeah.
Maybe
Yeah.
a condition should be that prior to the issuance of permit that the driveway is widened to the satisfaction of the director. So I just asked that question.
Julianne?
I'm not sure if curb cuts are going to be required, because is there a legal space in the garage? And then the second legalized space would be in the driveway? I'm not,
They're converting the garage to living space.
okay.
They're converting the garage.
All right.
Yeah.
okay.
And just to add to that, oh, sorry.
Yes, Jennifer, sure. Fire.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just, if the driveway is widened, we won't run into a variance issue with that. Just want to confirm that any widening would be legal and would accommodate the two spaces.
For you, Mr. Chair, that if the driveway's widened, it would have to be widened in accordance with the zoning. There are provisions in the zoning bylaw to allow driveway widening. And it doesn't always necessarily result in the requirement to have a wider driveway apron resulting in a curb cut. So I'm a little, perhaps a little concerned if we require a curb cut that's going to force something, but maybe Dave can speak to that. Sometimes we have a single width curb cut and have a double wide driveway so that we don't affect the on-street parking on a given street. So I'm just going to defer maybe to my colleague Dave, because if we make it mandatory that there's a curb cut when it may not be necessary, because you might have sufficient space to widen the driveway without necessarily widening the driveway apron and resulting in a curb cut. So I just clarify that.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair, when the applicant comes through for their curb cut application, one of the first steps they go through is through the planning staff, and they'll look at the maximum width of the driveway. And if they can fit that maximum width in there, and it, like Julianne mentioned, if it doesn't impact, any street trees, or if there's a fire hydrant or signs in the way or anything like that, or on-street parking.
On-street parking, yeah.
We can support that curb cut. They wouldn't be able to make something a lot wider than they would be allowed.
So back to Scott's point, though, then there probably should be a condition in here that that the applicant has to have 2 parking spots in conformity, or in two parking spots in a manner that is subject to final approval by the City of Kitchener.
Yeah, well,
Fine.
through you,
Yeah.
Mr. Chair, when they do their curb cut application, a lot of times they put the outline of the vehicle on the plan, and then we'd be able to see where the 2
Right.
spaces are, and we'd be able to
Scott?
support it that way.
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman, I went to the effort of kind of concocting a condition, thinking that this might come up. So I'm going to move the recommendation, subject to the following condition.
All right.
That the driveway be widened to accommodate 2 parking spaces to the satisfaction of the Director of Planning prior to the issuance of a building permit
Sounds good.
for this.
I'll second that, Mr. Chair.
Jennifer has a comment first.
My question was really just to confirm that you can have a double wide driveway and meet the bylaw. And I'm
Right.
pretty, okay, thank you.
That's correct. Yeah.
Happy to second that as well.
Okay. Bob had seconded already. All in favor? Carried. Thank you. Next application is A 2021-30. That's 80 Cortland Ave East. No one registered in opposition. Does anyone have any questions, comments, or a motion? Bob?
Well, Mr. Chair, seeing no one is jumping in at this point, seems fairly straightforward to me. There's no opposition to it. There's 3 conditions, so I move that this be approved following the staff report with the 3 conditions.
Second, Scott? All in favor? Carried. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, interject, I must take my leave at this point.
Okay.
And hopefully this will be goodbye and not welcome back when my appointment's over. Everybody's enjoying their lunch. Anyway, have a great day.
Thanks, Mike. Take care.
See you, Mike.
Okay, so Avondale was deferred. So next application's A 2021-32.
Sorry, through the chair. Andrea, you were raising your hand.
Yeah, sorry. By the time my Zoom connected, you had already made the decision, but is it too late to say something? I was hoping to address one of the conditions, and apologies, I had a little bit of a connection problem there.
Gee, never happens with me.
I live in fear of that spinning wheel at the wrong time.
Okay.
Sorry. So we're obviously in support of staff's recommendation and generally in support of the conditions, but in discussions with staff and based on the fact that there's no changes to the actual building, it's just changing the use and then adding some additional parking. It's been discussed that it'll be a stamped site plan approval. And I just have a bit of a concern that with the wording of the condition, it may suggest that we have to go through full site plan, which would suggest engineering drawings and the whole gamut. So I was just wondering if there was the ability to clarify or reword that recommendation that it's stamped site plan approval is required. Other than that, we're comfortable with everything else as recommended.
Julianne?
For you, Mr. Chair, I would be fine with that if that's been confirmed.
Okay. Jennifer?
Through you, Mr. Chair, that was actually going to be a comment or question of mine had we not moved at warp speed. But because I'm site plan, as we know, there's a specific definition of development when you can ask for site plan, and I'm not even sure that this application meets that definition at all.
Right.
So if the applicant is satisfied with a stamped site plan, the term used by Ms. Sinclair, I would support that revision to the condition.
Okay, so then that recommendation or that motion has been amended. Is that correct? And everyone's in agreement? Is that correct?
That was stamp plan B, correct?
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm
Yeah.
happy with that.
Okay, good. All right.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. All right. A 2021-32. 81 Waterloo Street. I'll slow it back down. This is
No, it's
straightforward.
not a criticism, Mr. Chair, at all.
No conditions. Motion or comments, questions, Scott?
Yeah, I'll be slower as well, Mr. Chairman. I just had a quick question for the applicant. If the applicant is available.
Stephanie?
Yeah, we're available.
Okay.
Okay, thanks very much. Just the question for you is, clearly you're constructing just the one-story unenclosed deck. Is that what you're doing? You're not going to have a deck on the second floor as well?
No, there will just be a one story off the main level of the home.
Would you have any objection if I added the words to the recommendation, which is clearly to approve, to permission to construct a one-story unenclosed covered deck?
It will be enclosed.
Oh, it will be enclosed, eh? Okay.
Yeah, what happens there is we live downtown, right? So often people will help themselves into our backyard to the point where we have to chain up certain items. So it will be enclosed with a locking door. It will be like a screened enclosed area with all windows, but it will be enclosed and be able to lock.
Then you would have no objection to me saying a one-story covered deck.
Correct. That's perfectly fine.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, I'm prepared to move this with that couple of words added, if
Okay.
possible.
Jennifer?
I'm seconding that.
Oh.
Move this along.
Jumping ahead, are we? Okay, all in favor? Carried, thanks. All right. Now, A 2021-33 has already been dealt with, so we're moving on to B 2021-15, 83 Elmsdale Drive. Staff's recommending approval with conditions. Does anyone have any questions or comments? There is no one registered in opposition. Scott?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, this seems complicated, but really it's only for servicing easements. We've dealt
Yep.
with this before on a land use basis, so I'm prepared to move the staff recommendation.
All right, second. Bob, all in favor? Carried, thank you. Next application is B 2021-16. It's 83 Second Ave. There is no one registered in opposition. There's two regional conditions that need to be inserted into the recommendations. Does anyone have any questions or comments? Or a motion? Scott?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for picking up the regional conditions. I also looked at condition 10, and it said that the owner obtains a demolition permit for a portion of the existing single detached dwelling. I think the whole thing is coming down. So just a minor wording change there. I think it's necessary to permit the demolition of the existing single detached dwelling.
Mm-hmm.
Not a portion of it. The whole thing's coming down.
That's correct.
Okay. Okay. All right. Anyone else?
Mr. Chair.
Bob? Yeah. Sorry.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I think this is fairly straightforward. We've seen many of these before, and as you have so appropriately pointed out, there needs to be two more conditions. So, and the modification as suggested by Mr. Hanna. So I move that this be approved as amended with the 13 conditions.
13. Okay. Second. Jennifer, all in favor? Carried. Thanks. Thanks, Boban.
Thank you. Take care.
Next application is, hang on here, B 2021-17. Support or opposition. We have a number of people in opposition. Staff's recommending approval with a number of conditions. Okay, what we will do is, I'm not sure if the neighbors have organized to have one spokesperson or if they've want to speak individually. If you want to speak individually, what I would ask for is that if someone's already made a comment or a point, that we don't need to hear it repeated. But if you want to reinforce what's being said, you can just say you're in complete agreement with what's already been put forward, and it will be duly noted. So with that in mind, I guess maybe what we'll do is we'll start with the opposition first and give them a chance to talk, and then we'll hear from either staff or the applicant. We'll see what the comments are from the opposition and determine it at that time. So who wants to start first? Julietta? Your name's at the top of the list here. I didn't quite hear that.
Hi, hello. Sorry about that.
That's all right.
Yeah, so myself, along with other neighbors, we wanted to know what the plans were for this house. There were concerns raised that that instead of a duplex, a house that would have four different living spaces would be built. So that was one of our main concerns.
Okay, I think what they're doing is they're making an application for a semi-detached, which would be 2, not 4. However, We can let the applicant address that specific question. Is the applicant online?
Yes, yes, I am.
Okay, there we go. Maybe you can answer that for us.
Yeah, we're planning to do 2 units, semi-detached. So the house will become from 1 dwelling unit into 2.
2. Okay. All right. Is there any other questions from anyone that's in opposition?
So Denny, would you like them pulled in individually?
It doesn't matter to me.
Okay, so let's, if it's okay, if we can just kind of do them down from the list, and then that hopefully we will address everybody.
Okay, so then we'll do Jeff Steckley next.
That would be great, thank you.
Okay.
Jack, I do see that you have your hand raised. If you are here for this item, please don't worry. We will pull you in as the last item. So please lower your hand at this moment and we will get to you.
Okay, Jeff.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak to the 82 Pattenden Ave severance application. I understand that the current R5 zoning for this property permits its severance and the building of a semi-detached dwelling, each of which cannot be duplexed. Based on the application for severance and the quality of the existing dwelling on the property, it appears that this is an investment opportunity that will not significantly contribute to the existing character of our street. My understanding is that this is the first severance and building of a semi-detached home on our street. This decision will most likely establish precedent for the consideration of other developers as properties on the street come up for sale. The fabric of our neighborhood and community has the potential to be significantly altered depending on the number of properties that could be potentially severed and redeveloped. I understand that the property falls within the residential intensification in established neighborhoods designation, yet don't know exactly what checks and balances this affords. My question is, to what extent is the Pattenden Ave neighborhood protected from development, which depending on the extent of the intensification, will significantly alter the character of our street? We are a neighborhood which is invested in the ongoing health and well-being of our community. The long-term implications of a decision such as this matter, both for us as well as for future residents of Pattenden Ave. Thank you.
Julianne, do you want to answer that question? You're on mute. There you go.
Yep, the property is currently zoned R5, which does permit a variety of low density housing forms, including the semi-detached dwellings that are proposed for this property and single detached homes. It does not have a further restriction on it in terms of not permitting anything more than 3 units. Which is not being proposed at this point in time. In addition, with respect to the lots that are proposed, I can say that they completely conform with the zoning regulations. And with respect to the comment about the RIENs, what that will ensure is that the setbacks of the new buildings will align with the existing established built-to line in the neighborhood and the streetscape. So that's what the RIENs will ensure. So I hope I've answered that question.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
Anything else, Jeff?
I think simply the piece that I'm most interested in is what the long-term trajectory looks like. I mean, are there ratios in terms of this kind of intensification, or are we looking at, 20 years down the road seeing a whole neighborhood full of redeveloped semi-detached homes?
I guess that's really market driven, Jeff, more than anything. And it's whatever the zoning would permit, which by the sounds of it, zoning would permit that on the entire street.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Christine? Christine and George.
Yes, hello.
Hi.
My main concern was what Jeff also said. Also, is there any for the dry or the garages? Is that going to be set back as well and not in front of the house like the other properties on the street?
Julianne?
Through you, Mr. Chair, with this being in a Rianne's neighborhood, then it would also protect for the location of the attached garage. It would have to be in behind the principal facade of the building. There are a number of regulations that apply to areas that are in an established neighborhood, and that would be one of them.
Okay, anything else, Christine?
No, I think that's it. Are we going to have a say in what the design plan?
I can speak to that. We haven't reached the design stage yet, but we are open to hearing what the neighbors have to say.
Okay, thanks.
So Denny, I believe Zoe is the next on your list. Zoe?
Hi, can everyone hear me? Okay, so
Sorry, Madam Secretary, I think we lost the chair.
I do believe so. I think Denny is currently frozen. So Bob, if you wouldn't mind assisting with the delegations at this time, I'm sure he will reconnect in just a few seconds. I saw him blip out earlier.
It's interesting that we had a brief comment earlier about connectivity in this world. Okay, so moving ahead, who is it? One of the neighbors is in concern about this?
Yes, I can assist. Zoe, go ahead.
Okay, thank you. So I just have something written here that I'm going to read. The construction that is taking place at 82 Patandan Avenue will directly put me and my neighbors at risk. It recently came to my attention, and I want to make sure that the committee and chair is aware of this, that the owners of 82 Patandan have rented out the dwelling for the beginning of May 2021. So knowing of this semi-detached development that's going to happen, is the plan to evict the tenants during a pandemic on illegal pretenses, as the construction would not be a valid reason for eviction. So I live next door and I work from home permanently. The noise would put my job at risk due to the elevation of noise, given the fact that we already deal with constant noise from the highway and the railway. Additionally, the other occurring construction that happens nearby, it would cause emotional and physical distress from the amount of noise pollution and vibrations this would cause. This project would directly contribute to the gentrification of this neighborhood. We do not need more semi-detached houses built in this neighborhood for the profit of the owners. We need more affordable housing in this neighborhood. I am publicly stating that this project should not be approved for the well-being of my community. Other neighbors have also expressed their disapproval with this project, but the timing of this committee meeting does not work for people who have to work and cannot attend. Thank you.
Okay. Next, I guess, would be Deb Huntsberger.
Yes, thank you for letting me join this today.
Sure.
I'm the home directly across the street from the home that's being proposed to be changed. I have a couple of concerns. Primarily, parking on the street is really ridiculous. There's times where I can't get out of my driveway, or I can't properly even safely get into my driveway with, if there's children on the sidewalks with bikes and stuff, because there's cars that park everywhere, and that home has historically always had more vehicles than what the street could really handle. And so that's a concern for me. We have also, since the time we've been on the street, we were attracted to this street because it was a post-war little community that was built with small homes, essentially, and very much a family atmosphere when we moved in. And we have completely lost that in this community now. Not all of it because of residential development yet, but the church has purchased all of the homes to the right of us up to Ottawa Street and down to the church. And the church on the other side owns the first, I believe, 2 homes on the same side of 82. We've lost neighbors. So there are renters in some of those homes. Some of them are sitting vacant. Their property maintenance is not great to begin with. And it feels like the whole atmosphere of the street has changed significantly. And I'm worried about that. I'm worried about that for future generations. I'm worried about that for myself in my retirement, in terms of safety, in terms of traffic. I know that the city has plans to put a median at the end of Ottawa Street to kind of calm traffic a little bit. But I'm not sure what that's going to do in terms of parking. So I'd be very interested to know what parking this particular dwelling is going to have to ensure that we're not having more. I know in the winter time, we've had a neighbor on the street who is recently passed, but we watched fire trucks and ambulances struggle to get down our street because people are parked on each side of the street. And when there are snowbanks, it's almost impossible. And I think that that's a serious piece that needs to be addressed. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Is there anyone else in opposition?
I do believe that we have one person that is also here for this item, so I'm just moving them over. Their name is Jack. I'm sorry, I don't
That's
have.
what I thought.
Yeah. So
That's all right.
So Jack, you should be able to go ahead and unmute yourself, but I will need your name, address, and phone number after the meeting. So if you haven't got my email address, we do need to touch base.
For me personally, all my questions have been asked, so I have no other questions.
Okay, good. Thanks, Jack. Okay, so there was some concerns. Maybe what we'll do in this instance is I'll open the floor up to the members of the committee, let them ask questions. We'll take it from there. So does anyone have any questions, comments, Bob?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Actually, I'm going to push this off to Mr. Suller. The neighbors have made some concerns about parking and traffic and accessibility of fire department and ambulances. Does the Transportation Services Department have any comments on this?
Well, through you, Mr. Chair, this is the first I'm hearing of it at the meeting today. So I have heard these comments before from other streets. I mean, when you have a snow event or you have snow happening on a street, all streets get smaller. That's just inevitable the way it is. There is on-street parking available. I was just quickly looking on both sides of the street, so that's permitted. As for the fire trucks not being able to get down there, I can't confirm whether they can or cannot. I don't know anything about that. I can't speak to that. As for the amount of traffic on the road, unless we have a study completed, I don't have a number that I can give you to determine, how much traffic is there, what the speeds are, what the classification of the vehicles are going on the road. And then I think there was something mentioned about the parking for the site. I would believe that the potential homes that are being built would have a garage, so that parking space, they would have their legal parking spaces in a garage, and they wouldn't have to park on street for a legal space.
Okay, thanks, Dave. Julianne, you had something? Just the garage issue?
That's correct, through you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to confirm that, there would be a requirement for provision of their own parking on site. So that would either be in the form of an attached garage or parking within the driveway that will be proposed as part of this development.
Right. Jennifer?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I first of all just want to thank the local residents for coming out and expressing their concerns. However, having heard the concerns, none of them, as I took them, really relate to the application or creating any adverse impacts from the actual built form of this project. We heard about landlord-tenant issues, which of course this committee has no jurisdiction over. We can't do anything about that if that's between the property owner and the current tenant. In terms of construction, that's just part of life, unfortunately. And I know it's a new added dynamic with all of us working from home, but keep in mind, if they were simply to demolish and reconstruct a single detached unit, we wouldn't be here and they would have the right to do that. There would be construction. That's just part of living in urban areas. So again, that's not relevant, unfortunately, to the application. Parking and traffic, it sounds like those are existing conditions. And I don't think there's any reason to believe that adding one additional unit from what's there now is going to exacerbate that problem, particularly when we heard from Mr. Seller that the proposed units will have their own parking and will likely meet parking standards, or else we'll be back here again, and then those concerns would become very relevant. But they're not at this point. It's assumed that they're going to meet the parking requirements to provide their on-site parking. I also heard some concern about renters and property maintenance, and I'm not sure how that's relevant. I would suspect that building 2 new units will only improve the streetscape and allow for additional rental or owned tenure to exist, and it supports the provincial local objectives for intensification. So all that said, I'm prepared to support the application at the appropriate time.
Scott?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, thanks very much. And I appreciate the comments from the residents. I just wanted to put a couple of comments in context. And I think staff have tried to explain that the setbacks of the new dwellings will be consistent with the homes on either side within plus or minus a meter. That's a requirement. And the REIN's building requirements indicate that the garages have to be either recessed or flush with livable space. A couple of comments have been made about precedent and destabilization. Unfortunately, I agree that that's going to happen, but the city in its wisdom has zoned this area for semi-detached. And so you're right, this may be the thin edge of the wedge, but I agree with my committee member, Ms. Meter, or Ms. Meter, that this is a good application. It's fully supported by the zoning bylaw. There is a condition 10 that requires the building plans to be submitted by the applicant and approved by our director of planning. Unfortunately, that doesn't involve the residents, and I would encourage the applicant to involve the residents. That would be a good thing to do. But when the time comes, I will be fully supportive of the application as well.
Anyone else or a motion? Jennifer?
Mr. Chair, through you, unless Mr. McCullough is going to add something, I'm happy to make a motion that the application be approved subject to the conditions set out in the staff report.
All right, second. Scott, all in favor? Carried. Thank you. Next application is B 2021-18, B 2021-20. It's a lot of 20s. 942 Dune Village Road. We have 2 people registered in support. I think a fairly straightforward applications. Anyone have any questions, comments, or a motion? Scott.
Mr. Chair, it's
Yeah.
Scott Patterson here. I have some comments if I could.
You fire away, Scott.
Yeah, so naturally I'm here in support of the application as I'm working on behalf of the proponent. But I did want to speak to 2 of the conditions.
Sure.
The first one being condition number 3. The way that condition is worded, And if it's applied to each of the decisions, it may be construed that you're required to pay $18,928 for each severance, when in actuality, that's the total.
That's the cumulative amount. Okay.
Yes. So I wondered if we could somehow change the wording or remove the amount or do something with that condition so that when it's applied to each individual approval, we're not paying that total on each individual property.
We could put in the cumulative amount of 18,928. How's that?
Yeah. Yeah. Total cumulative, something like that would capture it. And I think that would give a better understanding to the condition. And the other one would be condition number 12, which speaks to the environmental noise study required by the region.
Right.
So I have reached out to the region about this, and I haven't got a response yet. But the committee may recall that they approved severance applications for 518 Bridgeport, which is a regional road, and they didn't require a noise study for that particular property. Has same grading considerations, same type of design. They just imposed noise warning conditions, which were dealt with through an agreement. So I've questioned the region why we would need to do a noise study in this location where we didn't have to on a regional road just up from an access to the expressway. Again, I haven't got a response on that, but I just wondered if we could change the wording of this one as well. And my suggested wording would be that prior to final approval, the owner/applicant shall address environmental noise and, if necessary, shall enter into an agreement with the City of Kitchener to provide for the implementation of the accepted noise measures, all to the satisfaction of the region of Waterloo. So that leaves some flexibility that we could either do a study or they could just give us the noise warning clauses, but it doesn't obligate us to one or the other, and we still have to satisfy the region in that regard.
Okay. I think that's reasonable.
I asked the committee for the indulgence of those two changes, and other than that, I'm here in full support.
Okay. I think that sounds reasonable to myself, unless Garrett has any objections to that. I think he had carriage of this application.
Mr. Chair, I have no objections to those changes.
Okay. All right. Scott.
Yeah, just a couple of things of clarification, because I did speak to Mr. Stevenson ahead of time, indicating that there were really 3 applications here with 1 decision sheet, and I actually was going to make the same comment about condition number 3. I think in the future, what we should probably do is create conditions that say each will be subject to these conditions, so you know that you're going to have 3 separate sheets, because theoretically the committee could refuse one application and approve the other 2, as an example. Mr. Patterson's indicated condition number 12 on the report. It actually should be condition number 14. If you look at it, there's a 12 on the other page, and then it goes along 12 again. So I asked the committee's indulgence to change those 2. And there was also a condition that was missing about the demolition of the existing dwelling. And I talked to Mr. Stevenson about this. He's given me wording that the owner obtain a demolition permit to the satisfaction of the chief building official and remove the existing dwelling prior to the creation of the lots. So that would be one condition I would ask to be added, and maybe that would be condition 15.
All right.
And no concerns with that, Mr. Chair, from my part.
Okay, good. Thanks, Scott. All right. So there's now 15 conditions. Anything else or a motion? You want to proceed with the motion, Scott?
Yeah, I'm prepared to move the recommendation or for the 3 lots, subject to those changes that were introduced by the applicant, Mr. Patterson, the numbering change and the adding of the condition 15.
All right, second. Bob, all in favor? Carried. Thank you. Okay. Next application is B 2021-21 and B 2021-23, 654 Rockaway Drive. There's a lot of opposition on this one. So once again, When I call on the opposition, if something has been said already, it doesn't need to be repeated, please. And if you feel more comfortable by at least saying that you reiterate what's already been stated, then for the record, it will be put on the record. There, if this is to be considered, there's also some region conditions that need to be put into the recommended conditions from the staff report. And I think what we'll do, once again, is we'll start with the opposition. And I guess, Diane, we'll just work down the sheet the way that you have it. So the first one we'll hear from is Tim. You there, Tim?
Hello. Sorry, could you repeat that?
What part? We're ready to hear your opposition, the comments that you want to make.
I didn't actually request to speak in this call.
Oh, all right. I had it. Okay. All right. That's fine. Then we'll move forward then. So the next one then would be Heather and Bruce.
So just a note to the applicants or agents that are in attendance, there is going to be a quick blip on your computer when you're moved in to make sure that you have access to your microphone or camera. So as the chair calls on you, just be a little bit patient and we'll make sure that we get you unmuted and keep going, okay? So as we proceed, you will see yourself exit and enter the meeting really quickly, and that will give you access to your microphone and camera, okay?
Okay, Heather.
We will defer to Sharon and Phil Hartigan. I think they have a presentation for you.
Okay, so we'll hear from them next then.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hello, I am Sharon Hartigan. I appreciate the opportunity to speak at this hearing today. For 25 years, our family has lived at 644 Rockaway Drive. This is my forever home. In 1939, the curator of the Homer Watson Art Gallery lived here. Then for the next 60 years, the Kuntz Schreider family raised 8 children in this home. You will find each home on this block has a storied history steeped in the fabric of the city of Kitchener, dating back to the 1930s. This block is unique and distinct as it borders a historic golf course and heritage gardens. Our world was rocked when we learned the new owners of the neighboring property applied to the city to demolish and rebuild semi-detached dwellings on 4 lots. When we called the city to confirm the news, the response gave us little solace. It felt like we had no protection from a real estate agent and purchaser who seized an opportunity to profit on the laurels of our mature neighborhood. The staff, although empathetic, concurred with the owner's plans and basically said, yep, all looks good here. The specs meet our zoning criteria. The report from the planning department likely follows a template to fill in on each plan that lands on their desk. Unfortunately, it does not take the effect on people and the neighborhood into consideration. So I protest. I have taken hours and weeks of emails and phone calls, neighborhood discussions, guidance from our ward counselor, sleepless nights, and in general vulnerability to the bureaucracy of the city systems and department. Respectfully, I ask all of you to pick your heads up from reading the numbers, the sizes of the lots, the zoning, the bylaws, and truly witness with all honesty that this is a project that will not fit in as compatible on this property, on this block of Rockaway Drive. Just stand across the street in the golf course parking lot and visualize every square inch of 654 loaded up with brand new semi-detached dwellings that bear no resemblance to the properties up and down the block. They are not of like kind, as a city planner assured me when I inquired about our streetscape in January of this year. This type of development does nothing for the intensification of this area because their value will not assist in housing any first-time homeowner. Personally, I'm now faced with dipping into my hard-earned savings as I approach my retirement to re-landscape my backyard and protect my privacy, as a proposed 30-foot wall of a building would now look into my backyard and encroach closer to my property, reducing my sunlight. So tell me, what would all of you do if you were in my shoes? Where are my rights protected as a tax-paying citizen and contributing member to this community? I am requesting a deferral to the decision of 654 property to allow you and the city staff to further review the planning report and also to explore all the relevant issues raised in this hearing and in the numerous letters of opposition that you have received from our neighbors and concerned citizens. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Stuart, is Stuart next?
No, it's Phil.
Oh, Phil? Okay,
Yeah.
I just assumed
Hey,
you
that's
were.
okay. No, it wasn't a joint. It's like real life. Denny, I get to speak after my wife, so.
Okay, Phil.
Okay.
Fire away.
So, like my wife, I've resided at 644 for the last 25 years, and I too stand in opposition to the application. I'm going to be reading this statement as I have a number of quotes here. So, but first, when I speak of Rockaway Drive, I'm speaking of the portion of Rockaway Drive that's bordered by Floral Crescent and Dune Road. I believe that the staff report from the Development Services Department misrepresents our neighborhood. The report notes that the staff is satisfied with the creation of the severed lots. They're desirable and appropriate. Planning staff is of the opinion that the size and dimensions and shape of the proposed lots are suitable for the use of lands and compatible with the surrounding community. The report goes on in page 6 to state that, and I quote, the existing development of the neighborhood consists of a mix of single detached dwellings, semi-detached dwellings, and multiple dwellings. Lot sizes vary in width, depth, and area in this neighborhood. Well, for those of the committee that aren't aware of Rockaway Drive, let me provide you with the actual streetscape. First, the size, dimensions, and shape of these proposed lots are in fact not even close to being compatible with the lot sizes nor the architecture of Rockaway Drive. On this street, there are 30 homes and one clubhouse for the Rockaway Golf Course. Clubhouse was built in 1935. The homes were built between 1935 and 1953, with the most built in the 30s and 40s. All but one are single detached homes, and the only one is a duplex that was built in 1941. There are no semi-detached homes nor multiple dwellings on this street. The majority of homes have a 60-foot frontage, and this ranges with one home being 654 having 110 and one near Dune at 45 feet. To be clear, this application is to tear down the existing structure of 654 built in 1951, severing the 110-foot lot into 4 lots of 27.5 feet, 27.5 feet, 19 feet, and 27.5 feet, respectively, and then to construct 2 semi-detached dwellings. No house on this street has such small frontage. The proposal contravenes 2 important policies. The first is the City of Kitchener's official plan, and I quote from that, the city will ensure the cultural heritage resources are conserved using the provisions of the Ontario Heritage Act, the Planning Act, the Environmental Assessment Act, the Funeral, Burial, and Cremation Services Act, and the Municipal Act. I'll now quote from a second report, which is the extensive cultural landscape study, where the Rockaway Neighborhood Gardens and Golf Course is identified as one of these cultural heritage landscapes. I will only report on the most salient part for this committee, and I quote here. The Rockaway area consists of the Rockaway Gardens, Rockaway Golf Course, and the adjoining residential street of Rockaway Drive. Rockaway Drive was subdivided around the same time as the golf course was constructed. The residential architecture is characteristic of the houses built in the latter part of the 1930s. The direct relationship between the Rockaway Golf Course and Rockaway Gardens and other public area gives this area special status in the hierarchy of public open space in the City of Kitchener. Its overall visibility and strategic views contribute significantly to the quality of adjacent residential neighborhoods and streetscapes. Apart from its historical value, both the golf course and the gardens are extremely important public open space in the context of its urban surrounds. So the proposed severance violates the official plan and the cultural heritage landscape that's required to preserve it. There are no other streets in Kitchener that is bordered by a heritage rock garden on one side and a historical golf course on the other. It would appear that the City of Kitchener Planning Department based their recommendations on the residential zoning document with little or no consideration for the cultural heritage of the street. There needs to be a more thorough examination of what appears to be a simple severance. We ask the planning staff further considers the city's official plan and its obligation to preserve cultural heritage landscapes. So in summary, this proposed severing of 654 into 4 lots and the construction of 2 semis is not compatible in any way with Rockaway Drive. We would respectfully request the Committee of Adjustment defer this application. We are requesting a more in-depth study that would incorporate the heritage and integrity of this street. Thanks for your time.
Thanks, Phil. Okay, now Stuart.
Hello, Stu here.
Hello. There we go.
Yeah, I'm across the road from the proposed development, and I just want to just support. I think our neighbors Sharon and Phil have kind of summed up, my feeling on the development there, and
right.
I'm opposed to, the 4 driveways facing our front yard. So I'm in opposition, basically. Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Thank you.
Thanks, Stuart. Okay. Paul and Christine.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for the opportunity to speak. We don't have anything to add other than what Phil and Sharon have said, just that we are strongly opposed to the application, and everything that Phil and Sharon have said, we would like to reiterate all that to you. Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you, Paul. Sarah?
Hi, thank you so much. This is Sarah and James Francis, and we live at 636 Rockaway Drive, right beside Sharon and Phil. Sharon and Phil did a wonderful job with all of their points, and we would like to go on record to say that we agree with all of their points, and we would like to go on record to firmly oppose this application. Just one other point to add is just, how much money the people in this neighborhood have invested in their homes to maintain the character of the homes and to preserve the character of the neighborhood, and to make sure that everything is compatible with the streetscape of this section of Rockaway Drive. So that's all that we have in addition to what Sharon and Phil have said, and just beg of you to please take further consideration of this application.
Okay, thank you. Bob?
Are you referencing me, Mr. Chair, or somebody else?
No, sorry, Bob Hooton. Sorry, Bob. Not our Bob.
Hi, can you hear me, everybody?
Yes, yes.
Okay, great. I wasn't really scheduled to speak, so it was kind of a bit of a surprise. So I don't have anything really to written out per se, but I live directly to the right-hand side of 664. I'm at 664. I have 60-foot frontage on my property. I've been here for about 27 years. I've raised my children here. We are open to the backyard with Rockaway Gardens, so I back directly onto Rockaway. Neighboring house at 654, I've known Paul and his wife for the last 25 years since they've been coming up from Chicago. they've always asked me to, keep somebody in mind because they'd like to retain the character and the original house that his father-in-law built for him. So when the opportunity came that the house came up for sale, I'd just like to make mention that there was a letter that went back and forth from the realtor to the sellers, stipulating that the new buyer loved the location. They wanted to come into the back of the property. That's where they had their wedding pictures taken. They never thought they could own such a beautiful home on the street. And they said it's going to be a family home with their 3 children. Well, the day after the offer was accepted, now I believe that letter carried a lot of weight with the sellers. Well, the day after that letter was received, once they got the deal put together, I'm in real estate too. I've been at this for 30 years. Once that letter went through, I believe it weighed a lot to the sellers in their mind. And now the few days after the fact, this guy went into to apply for a demolition permit and started to apply for what is now 4 separate lots. Now, as well as across the street from the parking lot, and anybody that plays Rockaway Golf, sometimes they tear out of there up and down the street after a good game of golf. So the traffic situations can be kind of hazardous, I feel, because there's going to be an additional 6 more driveways and 6 more garages. So it's really going to take away from the landscape. They're backing onto the gardens to inflate the value of these properties. And I believe it's just more of a money grab when it comes to the buyer and his representative. That's about all I have to say.
Great. Thanks, Bob. You did pretty good for not wanting to talk.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks. Meredith.
Hi, my name is Meredith McFarland, and I'm here with my husband, Chris. We live at 670 Rockaway Drive, and we want to concur with everyone that's spoken so far with the concerns that they've raised. And we wanted to add that we are fairly new to the neighborhood. We used to live in Uptown Waterloo, and we never intended to move until we found this house on this street. So we specifically purchased this home on the street because of the streetscape and how beautiful it is and all the unique homes on it and the history that comes along with them. So our concern is what these houses aesthetically will look like and whether they will fit in with the current neighborhood, given we moved here recently because of what it looks like. So we just wanted to go on the record saying that. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Is that everyone, Diane?
Yes, I believe so. Nobody else is in attendance that is unrecognized.
Okay, good. Just a couple comments myself. I find it puzzling that we didn't have any concerns raised by Heritage. Just being a lifelong resident myself of this community, and knowing the significance of the golf course and Rockaway Gardens and how it's really contributed to the fabric of this community. So that I found a little bit shocking. And I also am really confused as to how this would blend in with the neighborhood. But that being said, I'll turn it over to my colleagues on the committee. Jennifer.
Find my unmute button. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I share your concerns. I'm not prepared to support the application. I don't see a deferral as being the answer. And I appreciate the residents' comments and suggestion for a deferral, but first of all, I just want to say there's a policy in the official plan, not to mention the policies the residents made reference to, but there's a policy for consents in respect of the obligations of this committee. That says applications for consent to create new lots will only be granted where the lots reflect the general scale and character of the established development pattern of surrounding lands by taking into consideration lot frontages, areas, and configurations. And from my review, with the greatest of respect, I see no analysis in that regard from city planning or from the applicant's planner. That hasn't been done. And when I take, if committee looks at the location map that has the lot pattern on it, you just a very simple exercise of looking at that lot pattern drawing 3 lines through the subject lands, you can just eye it up and you can see that it's completely different than what's there. I also know the street. I think it's a very unique street with, you know, a semi-rural cross section, very big lots. I acknowledge that there's development occurring up on the intersection on the corner lots. You know, there's some higher density stuff there that makes sense there. But in this case, it's quite obvious to me that this is not appropriate for these lands. So I will not be supporting the application or a deferral. Thank you.
Scott?
Mr. Chairman, is the applicant available? I have several questions for the applicant.
Oh, I'm
and we
sure.
haven't
Yeah.
heard the applicant.
Yep. Dave?
Yes, I am available for questions. Yeah.
Okay, there you go, Scott.
Oh, thanks very much. Do you have any idea what these semis are going to look like? I see squares. I don't see much else. Have you put some thought to what these semis are going to look like?
To date, the applicant is just proposing the severance of the lots. We do not have building elevations available at this time, but they would be informed by the character of the neighborhood as well as the city's work on the rain study. As shown on the severance sketch, the dwellings will be set back 8.5 meters, which is a compatible setback with the surrounding lots. But then the architectural character has not yet been determined.
Okay. Mr. Chairman, if I wouldn't mind continuing, I have a couple of questions for staff as well.
Sure.
Does the Heritage Conservation kind of landscape of the Rockaway Gardens, does that apply to this particular street?
Through you, Mr. Chair. My understanding is that the cultural heritage landscape includes a portion of the street and the golf course. So, but it doesn't designate these lands. They were inventoried as part of the cultural heritage landscape study. So they don't have a heritage designation per se. That's my understanding.
Okay.
And that any further action with respect to listing or designating properties would have to occur as part of subsequent review or study.
Yeah, and just as a follow-up to some of the comments that were made by the residents, when did this particular street, at one time in life when the homes were first built, I'm sure the zoning was just for detached dwellings. When did the zoning get changed to allow semi-detached dwellings?
Let me just see. The property is zoned residential 4, and residential 4 has always permitted semi-detached. So it may have been part of the initial bylaw 85-1 work, which was done in the 80s. And or perhaps there were subsequent modifications there too, but I don't have that information in front of me, but one can, just based on the zoning right now, that would have been, you know, at least in the 80s. At some point in time.
Through the chair, it's Craig here. I'm the fall planner and wrote the report. That is correct. The zoning was put in place in the 80s. This lot in question is also a double lot through the original plan of subdivision. It's 2 lots. So essentially, if they were to apply for one severance application to sever the lot in half from 33.5 to 16.75, it would match the lot fabric. Then if they demolished the house and built 2 semis, it'd be the same building footprint if it was 2 singles. So they're simply asking for permission to sever the lot back to essentially the original 2 lots, build semis, and then sever those lots individually for individual ownership.
Yeah, I don't really buy that analogy myself, to be honest with you, Craig. I could see maybe supporting split it in half and 2 singles, but 2 singles is by no means the same as two semis.
Through the chair,
Scott?
we're not asking if the use is permitted, right?
Yeah, I realize that. Scott?
Yeah, I was just going to say, if I can just continue just for a second, you know, looking at the lot fabric, clearly, you're right. This is a double wide lot, and it would make sense that, you know, you would have 2 potentially two buildings on there, like two lots with two buildings. And I think that's what the applicant is trying to do and make use of unfortunately, the existing zoning. Which, I mean, my feeling on this is this whole street should have been a heritage conservation district and you wouldn't have this, and it should be only zoned for singles. But we have to deal with reality. And without knowing what's going to be built on here, I'm going against Ms. Meter's comment about a deferral, but right now I'm opposed unless I know what's being built here, because character is so important here. They could design semis here that would fit, I think could fit the neighborhood. There's recessing garages, there's porches, there's things you can do. But if you're going to slap two contemporary semi-detached with 4 units on here, I think that's going in the wrong direction. So that's my comments.
Bob?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Been an interesting discussion. I've kept quiet up till now. First off, I want to well, I'm sure the applicant would know this, but for the residents, whatever the decision is made today by this committee can be appealed. And there's a 20-day period in which they can do that. So just as a point of informing the neighbors, as to this particular development, Mr. Chair, I've looked at it, I've driven down that street, and I think the scale, the massing, the streetscape are totally incompatible with the pre-existing neighborhood that could be considered a heritage neighborhood. So I will not support this application at all. And that's my comments, as brief as they may be.
Okay. I think we've fleshed out everyone's position. Does someone want to make a motion? Bob?
Mr. Chair, seeing no one else is jumping in, just to get the ball rolling, I move that this application be refused on the basis of the scale, massing, and streetscape are incompatible with the pre-existing neighborhood.
Second, Jennifer, all
Mr.
in
Chair?
favor? Yep.
No, it's okay.
Okay. All in favor? Carried. Thank you. It's refused.
Yeah. Yeah, okay, you said it, good.
All right, last application is, where are we here? A 2021-24, A 2021-34. And we have 2 people in support. Quick question for staff. In number 1, it says be approved as amended, but I couldn't really flesh out what needed to be amended. Is that just a typo in the report, or is there an amendment required here? Julianne?
Working on it. I believe that the amended was just some wording with respect to how the condition was actually worded. And I think it's already reflected in the report. Diana, we had a few email exchanges.
Yes, I can confirm. The street that the property resides on, it's just the way it was fully described for the zoning bylaw. I think it's a public lane is what, and I think I had it as it was just the second word, that it's a private street or private approved laneway. And I can't quite remember exactly, but that is it. He just wants it clarified for the decision purpose.
Yes.
Okay, all right. All right, so the amendment it's agreed to with the applicant? Sounds like it's housekeeping.
Yes.
Yep. Okay. All right. Questions, comments? Scott?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I'm going to support the application. I got to tell you, initially I thought that maybe the lot lines were wrong because they seem to be going in the wrong direction, but they actually follow the contours of the earth. So it's actually going to be a good thing. So I fully support staff's recommendation.
Okay. Anyone else? Is that a motion, Scott?
Yep, I will move that the application be approved. Both the minor variance and the consent, subject to the resolution established by staff.
Okay, second. Jennifer, all in favor? Carried. Thanks, guys. That concludes this
Chairman,
morning.
as usual, a very, very good meeting and well run.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, that concludes this morning's meeting. Motion to adjourn. Thanks, Bob. Second, Jennifer. All in